The ROG Flow X series of laptops. When the Flow X13 was first announced, I was skeptical. Then I got my hands on this laptop last year and I immediately fell in love with it. I love the form factor, the performance coming out of it, and everything it has to offer. Then a year passed by and now we finally have the Flow X16, a beefier version of the Flow X13 in terms of performance and size. I also immediately fell in love with the X16 as well, but yeah, I was then presented with an interesting dilemma. If I was given the choice to choose between the Flow X13 and Flow X16, which one will I choose? Well, that is one of the biggest questions that we're gonna answer today. And ROG isn't making it easy for us either, because for each of these laptops, it also is available in one or more variants. To make things simple, I'm going to choose one variant on each of these laptops. For us here in Malaysia, we have two variants to choose from. For the Flow X13, I'm choosing the lower end variant because the specs make sense, and the 4K 60Hz version with the RTX 3050 Ti just sounds like a bad time. And that variant also comes with the XG Mobile with the AMD Radeon RX 6850M XT GPU, but we'll talk about the XG Mobile later. As for the Flow X16, we are picking the highest end variant because the ROG Nebula HDR display is actually a mini LED backlit display, and it does come with an RTX 3070 Ti, so that made more sense to me. So then, if money is not an issue, what trade-offs will I get if I choose one laptop over the other? Which one is more suitable for whatever purpose that we want to use it for? Let's talk about it today, and I have also shortlisted a total of 4 crucial key differences between these two laptops. And I have compiled them into one handy table for you to see, and we will review each of the details as we go along this video. For the first point, we'll talk about the screen. This is the most obvious one because it also dictates the size of your laptop. The Flow X13 is obviously gonna be smaller, whereby the Flow X16 has a larger screen. Let's talk about the Flow X13 first then. This is a pretty basic IPS LCD screen, which I think it is good enough. The resolution is also sufficient for laptops of this size with the 1920 by 1200 pixels in resolution and also 120Hz refresh rate, and that means we can also enjoy some games at a relatively high graphical settings without over-stressing the GPU. And for the Flow X16, it is a completely different story because if you watch our recent review at the top right corner there, then you will know that I absolutely love the ROG Nebula HDR display. It is supremely color accurate, supremely bright, and it is also supremely thin in terms of bezels. And with that said, I just want to fill up the information on the table first because we will revisit this point near the end of this video. Now the second point is performance, and this is where things get a little bit funky because usually the size and weight of the laptop also correlates to the cooling capability of that laptop, hence affecting the performance and specs of that particular laptop. Since the Flow X13 is focused on being thin and light, the specs is pretty limited because of its cooling capabilities. You get an Ryzen 7 6800H CPU with 16GB of LPDDR5 RAM and RTX 3050 laptop GPU. Honestly, I think that is sufficient for this laptop, especially since the RTX 3050 laptop GPU only has 4GB of VRAM, and for that resolution, it's considered sufficient. You might say, hey, the XG Mobile external GPU exists. Yeah, I hear you. That XG Mobile can definitely elevate your gaming experience and also user experience since it doubles as a dock for you if you just plug in that one single cable. And then you get your external keyboard and mouse and also your external monitor connected via just that one single cable. However, yeah, I do need you to know that the XG Mobile is riddled with issues and also annoyances, and we have personally talked about it at the top right corner there, so watch that video if you want to know more about the issues of the XG Mobile. As for the ROG Flow X16, it doesn't need the XG Mobile because it already comes with an RTX 3070 Ti alongside with the same AMD Ryzen 7 6800H CPU with 16GB of DDR5 RAM. That's really powerful and sufficient for that resolution and or that refresh rate, depending on what kind of fidelity that you want to play your games at. And now we'll talk about the third point, which is portability. Of course, the Flow X13 is considerably smaller, hence it is also lighter in weight as well. The Flow X13 is only weighing in at 1.3 kilograms and its thinness is only at 1.58 cm. For the Flow X16, it is much bulkier and heavier in general, weighing in at 2.1 kilograms, and the highest end spec variant is measuring in at 1.94 centimeters of thickness. While the difference of just a few millimeters doesn't sound like much, but it's actually quite a big deal. Actually, the thickness of the Flow X16 and its weight made it quite difficult to grab if you want to hold it like this. Because of the texture and also the weight, it just makes this laptop slip off my fingers very easily. And that's not all. To make full use of both of these laptops, you'll also need to carry their own respective power bricks. For the Flow X13, it's using a much smaller power brick of this size, and it only needs 100 watts of power. And unfortunately, it seems to have to do something with their power delivery and whatnot, because if we connect it to our Ugreen 100 watt GaN charger using USB PD protocol, it will not get full performance. So you will still need this if you want to get full performance. For the Flow X16 on the other hand, you will need a much bigger power brick of 240 watts to get the full performance, and considering this size combining with this laptop, yeah, the package is not going to be lightweight. And then the fourth point, which I think is very important, is upgradability. This point is important especially for those who want to quote-unquote future-proof your laptop in certain aspects, or maybe just extend its longevity. They both open up the same way, just a few screws at the bottom of the laptop, and then the whole back panel can be popped off. However, the insides are completely different. For the Flow X13, it is rather limited in terms of upgradability, and the only things that we can swap out is Wi-Fi chip and also the SSD. And yet the SSD is not using the standard size, it is using the M.2 2230 size. These kinds of SSD is not easy to find and is also much more expensive per gigabyte, so you have to keep note of that. And I think that the biggest issue here is that the RAM is soldered. That means we cannot upgrade to, let's just say, 32 gigs of RAM down the line. What we buy is exactly what we are stuck with until the end of the lifespan of this laptop. Unless you want to get the 4K 60Hz version, that comes with 32 gigs of RAM. For the Flow X16, I said in our review that this laptop has the best layout motherboard for a gaming laptop so far. It has double M.2 2280 slots, and one of them is used for the bundled SSD when you purchase this laptop, and another one is available for us to do whatever we want. And then there are also two SODIMM RAM slots that we can easily access, and we can slot in up to 64 gigs of RAM if we want to. And of course, the Wi-Fi chip can also be swapped out if we want to do that. And a few more things to mention regarding these two laptops. Well, the ports on these two laptops are pretty much identical, it's just that the Flow X16 has much more ports because of its bigger size, but the placement of them are exactly the same. And that's not good because the USB Type-A port is located right here where the external mouse is supposed to be, and yeah, it's gonna be annoying. And they are both also convertible laptops like what we mentioned earlier, so you can turn these two laptops 360 degrees and use it as a tablet. And both of these laptops, like what we mentioned earlier, are also using touchscreens. So, decision time then. To get the Flow X16 or Flow X13, that ultimately depends on what size of a laptop you want to use. The size, I think, is the biggest double-edged sword, and ROG told us that yeah, a lot of people use the Flow X13 and they say they wanted a larger size laptop, so that's why the Flow X16 exists. With a larger screen size means beefier specs, magnificent display, fantastic upgradability, but making it less portable and also heavier, and you will also have to carry a much larger power brick with you if you want to use this laptop at its full potential. Granted, you don't have to carry the XG Mobile, which is a plus point. The Flow X13 is definitely more portable, and it's more like a souped up ultrabook because its portability and performance is just amazing. You just have to sacrifice upgradability. So it ultimately boils down to your personal preference, and there are more variants of the Flow X13 and X16 like what we mentioned earlier, but I just think that they're not that good of a deal. So yeah, that's it. If you're considering to get these two laptops, do let me know down in the comment section below which one you will choose and why. Because for me, I'm having a really tough time choosing either one of these laptops. Katin.